Hello, and welcome to Teaching My Cat to Read, the very serious book review podcast. I'm Eli.
I'm Em.
And I'm Lottie. And this week, we're discussing everything about Hogfather by Terry Pratchett.
I just realised you saying jingle, 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 but this is very thematically appropriate. Is there a tiny gnome with a little bell sitting above your head making the jingle, jingle noises? This is...
Yes. I mean, it is our Christmas special, so Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. What the other phrases you say at Christmas? Merry Christmas.
Happy New Year.
Season's
We're
greetings.
not quite there, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Season's greetings.
Yeah, we're not quite at the New Year. Yeah, season's greetings. All those things. Yeah, and I am very excited to talk about the Hogfather because this is only my second Pratchett book that I've read.
Second in Discworld, because Good Omens is Pratchett as well.
Second of Discworld, yeah, it's good. Yeah, Good Omens is both, but yeah, second of Discworld books. And yeah, I think we're going to have a really, really fun chat about this. But as always, as we will kick off with our terrible summary of this book. I just love that Death just wanted some sort of recognition.
I want to hug Death so bad. This is the theme of this book.
And also the fact that there is a death of rats.
The Grim
just
Squeaker!
like squeaking everywhere.
Yes.
It just made me so happy.
I think my terrible summary would be Jingle Bells, Fantasy Santa Claus is dead. Yeah, that's about it. It's an odd one to summarise because it's kind of a murder mystery, but also sort of not. It's odd.
Yeah. So for people like myself who aren't haven't read wider Discworld, do one of you guys want to give an actual summary of this book and how it sort of fits in the wider Discworld universe?
Sure. So I guess the impetus for the plot of this book is the idea that in the Discworld there are these entities called that are known as the Auditors, but they don't really have names, and they don't like. What's it, the way that it's described? They wish the universe was just a bunch of rocks flying in circles. You know, they don't like life, anything with identity, anything with belief, imagination. They hate anything that's
It messes
alive,
up their filing system.
basically. Yeah. And they hire this assassin, Tiatime, or Tea Time. You know, every single it's spelled.
No, we have to call him Tea Time. It's like the whole the Mako thing in Leverage. You can't use you can't use the fancy way he says his name. You have to call him Tea Time.
And nobody ever calls him
so much.
by his name the way that he pronounces it, except for Death. Anyway, and this assassin is hired by these auditors to kill the Hogfather as a sort of he's sort of emblematic of humanity's belief in the irrational, right? The Hogfather being Santa, essentially. And this is part of the Discworld, so it runs on the same kind of belief system that we had in Small Gods, where the more people believe in you, the more powerful you are, and if nobody believes in you, you're not powerful. You sort of get as close to dying as a god can. Mm-hmm. And so the Hogfather being very powerful is emblematic of the fact that humanity believes in him, even though it's irrational, and the auditors hate this, so they want him to be gone. And they hire this absolutely batshit crazy, unhinged, deranged, unsettling, deeply creepy assassin.
Terrifying.
To do that.
Yeah.
My favourite character introduction ever, this leader of the assassins is like, oh, he came to us as a child after his parents had died. In retrospect, maybe we should have wondered a bit more about that. It's just, I love it so much.
And this assassin succeeds in, gods can't really be killed per se, but he succeeds in undoing the Hogfather. And how is kind of a plot point. So we're gonna save that as spoilers until talk about it a little bit later. And then what happens is Death, as another entity that exists because humans believe in him, goes, okay, well, this is I'm going to try and rectify this, or at least, because the Hogfather has been killed at Christmas, or what is it? It's
Hogswatch.
Hogswatch, yes.
The 32nd of December.
He has been killed right beforehand, and obviously if all the little children don't get their gifts and whatever, people will even more stop believing in the Hogfather, and it will be a disaster.
And then the sun won't come up tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so Death, basically part of the plot of this book is Death pretending to be the Hogfather and going around and doing his duties, covering for him, basically. Yeah. And the other half, or another part of the plot, is that because the Hogfather isn't around, there's a lot of spare belief sloshing around, and so lots of other entities come into being because people believe in them, because there's lots of spare potential energy knocking around because the Hogfather's gone, and where does all that belief go? Well, it goes into things like the god of hangovers and
the oh god, please.
the oh god of hangovers,
the oh god and the Veruca gnome.
The pencil eater.
The pencil eater.
Yes. I think it's one thing that. So yeah, as someone who hasn't read Wider Discworld, and I listened to the audiobook read by Nigel Planner, and I laughed out loud so many times while listening to this book, and just like my family just like, what the hell are you listening to? I'm just like, I'm listening to an audiobook. And so I think it's just the fact that the writing and the plot is so good. So even though there are things that I will have questions for you guys about, just in the like I say, the wider Discworld that were slightly confusing to me as a first time listener / reader, but that didn't detract from the enjoyment of listening to this book. Like, it was just such a fun ride. Just loved it.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about because this is so I read the Discworld I didn't realize there was any kind of like prescribed reading order, or not that there is, everybody disagrees, but I basically read whatever we had in the house, and I think my dad's the other main Pratchett reader in my family, and he kind of had a sort of fairly eclectic collection of them. Like, he didn't have the first book in a lot of sequences. I think he used to get them from the library. So Hogfather was actually the first Death book I read, and also the first Susan book. So this is another
love Susan.
Yeah, so Death has a granddaughter. In Mort, Death adopts a young woman who then ends up married to his apprentice, and then they have a kid, and that kid is Death's granddaughter Susan, who is extremely badass, and I love her with everything in my tiny gay heart.
She's so good.
She's the main character, or she's a main character.
I forgot where I was going with this. I had a point. Oh, yes. This was my first Death book and my first Susan book. And I read it with not very much experience, I think, of Discworld. Like, I'd read a couple of Rincewind, so I knew who the wizards were. And I'd read Guards, so I knew who the guards were. But it was my first introduction to Death properly. It was my first introduction to Susan properly. The Raven and the Grim Squeaker.
The guards aren't in it at all.
Who's aren't in it?
The guards in this one, right?
They're Christmas.
Yeah, they are. Nobby Nobbs is in it. Nobby Nobbs goes to see the Hogfather.
Oh, yes, they are. Sorry, my bad. Ignore that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's one of my favourite scenes as well. I can't believe I forgot that.
Yeah, it's so good.
It's so beautiful, but the fact that there are all these other bits that I've just heard by proxy from Em and Eli, like Susan and Death, and even though I'd only heard of them by proxy and through pop culture, I still just loved. I just love Susan, and they introduced her so well, and her relationship with Death and how that all works. So, yeah. I definitely think you can enjoy reading this. If you haven't read any other Discworld book at Christmas time, just read this one. Read it and love it.
I think Death is hands down my favourite character.
Yes, I love him so much.
I just love him. I just want to give him a hug constantly.
I know, right? He's so good.
In the book, and I'm pretty sure in the book his text is all capitalized, isn't it? So
yeah.
I listened to the audiobook, and the audiobook narrator, and it sounded like, because this audiobook I listened to was clearly made, I reckon it must have been like 90s or something. It's quite an older record.
Yeah.
It sounds like, it just reminded me of the Boy Wizard books, which I listened to on cassette, just to date my age.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And it just sounded like that, and it made me feel really like nostalgic, but also I don't know, it just fitted for this book. I don't know why, it just fitted.
Well, there is an adaptation as well, isn't there? There's a movie adaptation, which I haven't seen.
There is. I haven't seen it.
I planned to try and watch it, and then just didn't have time.
I just can't bring myself to watch Pratchett adaptations. I tried for Going Postal, and then they made Adora Bell, nicknamed Spike, nicknamed Killer. Yeah, they made her cry on screen in front of Moit, and I was like, I'm sorry, you have fundamentally misunderstood this book.
Yeah.
If I ever see you, creators of this adaptation, I will light you on fire.
Yeah, that's fair. I hear the Hogfather one is good.
Yeah, I've heard better things about the Hogfather one, I will admit.
One thing as a non-Discworld wider book reader was so I knew the Wizards of the Unseen University existed.
They're a lot of fun.
But where do they fit in sort of the wider context of in the book? Susan goes to visit them to try and get the god of hangovers, who she's picked up along the way, who's been spat out due to this extra belief that's kicking around because of the death of the Hogfather. And so it's the guy who is the god who effectively receives everybody's hangovers, because when you get a hangover, you go, oh God, I got a hangover, which I loved as a concept. And he is the only guy they can get information out of, so they have to go to the university to get a potion to...
They need a hangover cure, so he's sober enough he's recovered enough to tell them what the hell is going on.
Yeah.
So wizards. I mean, the very first Discworld books are wizard books, but it's not the current run of wizards. So Colour of Magic and Light Fantastic follow Rincewind, the wizard with 2 Zs,
right?
As he plays tour guide to the Disc's first tourist in Ankh-Morpork. I'm trying to remember when Ridcully becomes Arch Chancellor. I think it's this current crop of wizards, I suspect, is either from Reaper Man onwards or from Moving Pictures.
Okay.
I can't quite remember. So
I feel like it's probably after Guards.
Ridcully's definitely the Arch Chancellor in Men at Arms. I don't know about Guards.
Yeah.
But like Reaper Man is a wizard. Reaper Man is kind of the start of the association of the Death books with the Wizard books.
Okay.
Because one of the people so Reaper Man, Death takes a holiday, sort of. He's being forcibly retired, and he decides to go have an existential crisis about it. It's very sweet. But they have a similar thing of like, because Death isn't doing his job, there's a lot of extra life sloshing around, and that means that there's an undead wizard running around. So like the wizards are kind of involved in that one.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
And like, the wizards turn up in a lot of Ankh-Morpork books. So the Guards books, Moving Pictures, the Moist books later.
And Ankh-Morpork is the main city in Discworld, right?
Yeah, Ankh-Morpork is the main city of the Disc.
Cool.
You can think of it as like basically fantasy London, I would say.
Okay. Yeah. That's the vibe I got.
Yeah, the wizards kind of basically turn up whenever something is with the fabric of the universe. The wizards are usually kind of involved because they sort of look up from whatever food they're eating at the moment and go, something's with the fabric of the universe. We better get involved.
Yeah.
And they're usually very, like, unhelpfully. They are not...
Oh, yes.
They're not the most effective. Rincewind is honestly the most effective at dealing with the whole, like, something's with the fabric of reality. And usually he hits it with a half brick and a sock. Like, the wizards are not great at this, is what I'm saying.
It reminds me of that Tumblr post where it's like my devastating counter magic, where while you are standing there reading out spells, I just close the distance and punch you very hard in the chest. Yeah. Like, being a wizard is easy.
You can really tell that Rincewind grew up in Ankh-Morpork, when in doubt, hit it really hard and then run away.
One other thing I really did enjoy about this book in particular, again, as a non-wider reader, was the names of Tea Time's like accomplices and the backstory to how they got their name.
Oh, Medium Dave. Yeah.
Like Medium Dave and Chicken Wire.
Chicken Wire.
Like how Chicken Wire got his name is really, really dark. Like
it's horrifying, my dudes.
Fine.
Yeah.
But it was just like, oh yeah, so Chicken Wire got his name because he would like realise that if when they, get rid of a target and they threw this guy into the sea and sometimes
into the Ankh usually
you can't throw people into the Ankh because they just bounce.
They just bounce, so they wrap them in chicken wire. That's how he's got his nickname. And I was like, okay, but it's just the fact that all these names is like Medium Dave and Chicken Wire, and I was like, it just made it so much more funny to listen to.
Pratchett is extremely good at naming people. I think the wizards are another good example of that. Like Ponder Stibbons. Like, what a name. Ponder Stibbons.
It's just... The names are so evocative of the world. And I love that as a newbie. It just made me so happy.
One of the things that I love as somebody who did maths is the fact that the senior wrangler is a member of the university.
Yeah.
And the senior wrangler is what you call the person who gets the top marks in third year of undergrad at Cambridge for maths. Like, if you are top of your year in the final year exams at third year Cambridge, you are the senior wrangler. And I love that he just took that and put it in the book, and it does not stand out at all among all the other like silly fantasy titles, but it's also real, and it tickles me every time.
It's like a professor of cruel and unusual geography.
Yeah.
It's like as somebody who has been in academia, like you can kind of go, some of these people exist.
The wizards are such a send-up of Oxbridge. It's really, really funny.
I loved it, but also what I loved was Hex, the computer. They said the computer that's running ants.
The thinking engine.
Oh my god! As a software developer, can I just say, that's how computers are.
And it's also the fact that it's like, why is the computer not working? You effectively tried turning it on and off again or whatever, or like kicking it, and like can I give it a drink?
Rebooting Hex involves hitting it with a boot on a stick. Yeah, It has a mouse, but it's like an actual living mouse, and they have to feed it cheese regularly. And if you take the mouse away, Hex stops working.
As someone whose literal career is in software development, like, this is accurate.
I know.
It is closer to witchcraft than any of us are really comfortable with.
Oh, absolutely. Like, my work computer is haunted, you know? Anyway.
No, this is very funny coming back to it, right? Because as a kid, I was not, like, into computers at all when I read this. So, like, most of the hex jokes went straight over my head. Like, the whole thing about it being full of ram skulls.
Yeah.
Like, random access memory. I didn't know that. I didn't get that at all.
Oh my god, that's amazing. Because I quit like that the fact that bees are storing it in a honeycomb, and it's like, you know, they just need, like, you know, what they need is they need to add a cloud, like a literal cloud, and then you can upload things to the cloud.
I wouldn't be surprised if, like, later iterations of Hex did end up with that. Because that's the kind of thing that Pontus Dibbons is like, we're building something that already exists, but I can't help feeling like we're doing it slightly wrong. Like, Pontus Dibbons is the head of the high energy magic building, which is like the wizard equivalent of the nuclear physics department.
Yeah.
But they have created the thinking engine, so they're also the computer scientists, I guess.
Yeah.
But Pontus Dibbons is like the only vaguely like rational person in the university. I think Rid Cully tries. Or like Rid Cully has his very own like concrete, unassailable sense of rationality that nonetheless does not match up quite with everybody else's.
Yeah.
But Pontus Dibbons is the person that's like, we should have review boards. We should probably teach students. We should have like an HR department. Why are you all so terrible? And they're all like, we're having fun. I don't know what you...
We're just having a laugh. We just got all this grant money to do some random experiments. So YOLO.
Pretty much, yeah.
But like in the because we've read Small Gods for a previous episode in series 1. And it was, it's quite interesting because I didn't actually twig on the fact that, you know, it's a similar belief system, obviously, in the Discworld with you know, what it means to have that belief and it to grow. But yeah, like, what are your kind of thoughts on those belief things? And because it is a big part of this book is the fact that Hogfather's dead because there's no belief in him anymore, and that's why Death has to go and pretend to be Discworld Santa.
So at this point, do we want to talk about how Tea Time kills the Hogfather?
So let's say spoilers. Go.
Tea Time kidnaps a tooth fairy, and he gets access to the place where all the teeth go.
Because the Tooth Fairy is a franchise now.
Yeah. And it's a bit like delivery drivers. And he kidnaps Tooth Fairy and he goes to Tooth Fairy headquarters, which is this sort of weird place that exists because children believe in it. It's like, you know, when a kid draws a picture and it's like got the green grass and there's blue sky above and the house that's got the four windows that are all like little grids. This is the embodiment of the place that they are drawing, that they all sort of seem to have this shared understanding of. And he goes there and he basically collects all of the teeth that children have been giving to the tooth fairies over the, like, forever, basically, as long as there's been tooth fairies. And he collects all these teeth, and there's like really old magic, which is that if you have something of somebody's body, like a lock of their hair or whatever, you can control them to a certain degree. And so basically what he's got control over the belief of all the children of Ankh-Morpork, and he basically stops them all believing in the Hogfather. He causes societal-wide skepticism of the existence of the Hogfather, which then kills the Hogfather, because if people don't believe him, then he doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And this is a problem because without the Hogfather, the sun won't come up in the morning.
So I wanted to say one of the things I really liked about this that I don't think I picked up on, and again, it's my brain being hooked on structure again, but like, I was kind of thinking, okay, so like, I know that the wizards are sort of there to like, they do the hangover cure, and like, just the wizards being wizards is always a fun time. I'm not going to complain about the wizards being present. And I was like, but what's the deal with the shower thing, right? So the opening wizard scene is the like, oh, they found a bloody stupid Johnson bathroom in the university. So there's an inventor in the Discworld called Bergholt Stutley Johnson, who makes things that only work doing something completely different from the thing that they're designed to do.
Yeah. So a bathroom's not a bathroom.
Yeah, basically. I mean, it is a bathroom, but it's also, like, extremely dangerous. So, like, they found it behind a bookcase or something, and it's, like, the door's nailed up, and everybody's like, why are you unnailing the door, Rid Cully? And he's...
You know, this is not a place of honour. Do not open this door.
yeah, pretty much. And all the other wizards are gathered round, and Rid Cully's like, no, I want my own bathroom. I'm sick of showering with you guys. It's unhygienic. Rid Cully is big on hygiene. This is a thing we learn in this book. I was like, I want my own damn bathroom. I'm gonna this door. And they're like, oh wait, no, it starts with he wants to the door because he wants to see why they wanted it closed. Why somebody wanted it closed so bad, because that is humans in a nutshell. Anyway, and like this is a joke that sort of bookends the book. Anyway, is the Rid Cully trying to use the bathroom and it like being completely up because it's a bloody stupid Johnson. But basically what that seems to be there for is to drop this idea of sympathetic magic really early. Because that's the bit where he has a shower in there and he's like, oh, it's got pots for like your toenail clippings and because you've got to get rid of that stuff because it's ancient magic. It's so ancient that it's barely even magic anymore. But if you have something of somebody's body, you can control them.
Oh.
And like it's a throwaway line in an ongoing joke about a bloody stupid Johnson bathroom.
Right, that's probably why I didn't pick up on it.
But it's thrown in right at the beginning just to remind you that that's a world mechanic that exists.
Right, yeah, because I didn't pick that. That's something I didn't pick up on, but going back through it would be quite interesting to pick up on that again.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's an odd one. Like I said, when I first read it, it took me maybe 3 readings to work out how they actually killed the Hogfather.
Yeah.
You know what took me a long time to get was what was the world that they were in? Like, you know, this world that is the place that... Because it was described as if it ought to be staggeringly obvious, and it wasn't to me. Like, I felt like I was really missing something that would illuminate the whole thing for me. And actually, you don't need to know that in order... Like, when you get to the point where it's made very clear to you what this place is, you're just like, oh, that makes sense. It's not I have to reread.
And I like that it's Susan that gets it. I like that it's the governess who's like, I've seen this before. I know what this is. Yes. And for ages, it's just unsettling. Like, the people who are there to steal the teeth are like, the sky's weird. And they don't explain to you why the sky is weird. And and you just get this sense of like a sort of unease about the world is slightly wrong somehow.
I picked up that it was an idealized, like, sort of... It was as if somebody had only described these things to you and you tried to draw them. But I didn't get what that was meant to represent.
I think I picked up on it with the connection with the children, but it was one of those things I think if I listen to this book again, I'll pick up more in it, but it doesn't distract from the story.
Mm-hmm.
I really loved the narration of death. Just the entire concept of death and the guy who goes around with death.
Albert,
Albert. And the fact that there is this big... that I think the thing that encapsulates it for me is... So death is effectively going around, obviously trying to be the Hogfather, giving out presents, trying to fulfill kids' wishes, but fulfills them literally, which is great. And there's this sort of scenes opened by the guy who's running like the shopping centre with the fake Santa and the gnomes, and you know, if you've probably seen somewhere where Christmas is celebrated quite regularly, you'll have seen these kind of setups. And the fact that death just goes in with the real pigs, I love that bit, because the fact that
your pig is whittling on the shopping mall carpet.
Pigs like pee on the floor, and they're really like, not to describe it as ugly, but the only way I can describe it is like the pigs are not like this perfection idea of the Hogfather's pigs.
They're not cute.
They're not tame. They're like real pigs. They smell like pig. They act like pig. They're close to feral. They are more like wild boar, which are like, we will kill you if you look at us wrong. You know?
And like the kids are entranced by these pigs. They're like, oh, let me look, it's a real pig. Anyway, and so the fact that death goes in, it's like, right, I'm just going to set up shop and just start giving out presents to kids.
For actual free, which the mall Santa is not supposed to do.
That is the point at Christmas, right? You know, like giving presents out for like free will and good cheer and all that jazz. And then the fact that the guy who owns the shop calls the guards to be like, is he allowed to do this? And the fact that it's like a discussion on like the commercialization of Christmas, which I just... it's just that I really
enjoyed the shopping mall owner as like peak capitalist being completely unable to get himself past the idiot logic of knobby knobs. You know, where they're like, he's giving away toys for free, stop him. And it's like, well, are they your toys? And he's like, well, no. And they're like, well, so he's not stealing anything, right? And it was like, well, no, but... But yeah, my favourite bit about that is the sword thing. Is like, there's a girl that asks for a sword, and her parents are like, no, she wants a doll's house and pink thing. And she's like, I want a sword. And Death gives her a sword, and the guy's like, you can't give her that. And he's like, just what she asked for. And it's like, what is it? He says it's educational, and then the parents are like, she might cut herself, and he's like, well, that will be an important lesson. And it's the fact that like
it's like, oh, the kids asked for a pony, but they live in a flat on the 3rd floor. And it's like, what if there's a pony in the bedroom? And he's like, no, obviously I put it in the kitchen. Like, or no, you put it in the bedroom, not the kitchen.
The other way around,
in the kitchen, it's unhygienic.
Yeah.
And it was just, and
they live on the 3rd floor, so it's like, now that's what I call belief. And it's just, it's so good.
If this doesn't make them believe in the Hogfather, nothing will.
Yeah. And like the fact that then sort of on a side quest, this is Susan's running around trying to fix or like understand what's going on.
I mean,
so
she's in a supernatural murder mystery. She's like, why is my granddad pretending to be the Hogfather? That's kind of creepy. What gives? And it's quite funny because she's kind of got this attitude towards him like he's a slightly senile older relative that keeps doing bad things that she has to clean up after. And like that there's no internal logic to his actions at all. And in so doing, she works out that the Hogfather's dead and how that happened and, you know, all of this. But she's essentially like trying to solve the crime of who killed the Hogfather and how. And Death is trying to make sure that, like, the Hogfather has sort of an occult space to come back to. But, like, I really enjoyed the fact that he basically tricks her into investigating.
Yes.
He's all like, nothing's wrong. I don't know why you... this is none of your business. You want to be normal,
and do you
right?
know what I love about that is that there's a bit later where the auditors are trying to figure out if they can get mad at him.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, no, he very expressly forbade her from doing this, not realizing that he is human enough to be able to say one thing and mean another.
To do reverse psychology.
Exactly, you know. He's learned some headology.
Yeah. There's a bit where, like, Albert is trying to explain to him afterwards, like, you made her really angry, you know. He's like, oh, no, did I? And it's like, you know, she won't be able to resist... trying to get involved now. She's going to interfere, and Death's like, oh no, will she?
Oh no, what a shame.
And he's like, I'm so sorry, Albert. You know, I just don't understand humans all that well. And Albert's looking at him like, right,
really, right, yeah,
side eye, like, okay.
The fact that, like, what I love is that you get these 3-dimensional characters, but when Susan goes to Death's house, and it's full of like mundane human things because
and
he wants to
he
learn
has
more.
Cats now.
And the fact Death has cats, that made me so happy.
Death really likes cats. I think somebody in an earlier book asks him what the meaning of life is. It's like, what's it all about when you get right down to it? And he's like, well, cats are nice.
I feel the cat rating will be high, just like the fact that Death has cats just makes me...
Yeah, a house full of cats.
Yeah. But in terms of, I guess, like, Christmas novels, because, again, we did read Christmas Carol, which sort of, again, kickstarted the whole commercialization of Christmas, but...
Which is not really what Charles Dickens intended, but it is quite funny to see.
No, but it's kind of what's happened.
But yeah, it's a really interesting comparison, isn't it? Because I kind of... When we did the Christmas Carol episode, that was what made me want to do the Hogfather, right? And when we were talking about Christmas Carol, I kept thinking, oh, it's like this thing in the Hogfather. It's like this. And now I've read Hogfather and I'm kind of going, I was struggling for a while to kind of come up with like actual comparisons.
Yeah.
And I think there's two main things. There's two main things that strike me. Firstly is that they're both ostensibly about Christmas, but they're actually horror stories.
Yeah.
Because some of the in the Tooth Fairy Castle is so scary.
Yeah.
It is like genuinely horrifying.
Well, so what happens in there is that because it's a place that's completely powered by children's imaginations and children's belief, what happens is when things start to go wrong for the people who are in there, they start to get chased by basically there's a bogeyman that lives there, and they start to get chased by manifestations of their childhood fears. So there's like, if you're someone who used to suck your thumb as a child, you might have heard the whole thing about like, oh, there's a scissor man who'll come and chop your thumb off if you keep sucking it. And that's one of the monsters that comes after one of the mooks who's been hired by Tea Time. And like,
one of them gets eaten by a wardrobe, like the childhood wardrobe that, you know, it looks creepy in the corner of your room. And like
these things have no effect on Susan because she's just badass like that.
Yeah.
And, you know, she stares down like this scissor monster and she goes, what? You're not my monster. You're not after me.
I particularly enjoy with that one. So when we meet Susan, she's a governess in this one. She's teaching to looking after 2 kids. And their previous governess basically tried to control them by telling them all of these bogeyman stories, you know, like the scissor man, like if you tread on the cracks, bears will eat you. There's a monster under your bed that tries to kill small children who are naughty when they go to sleep. All of this crap. And Susan really, really hates the previous governess. But she has a poker that the children believe in that she uses to beat up, because the monsters are real because it's the disc, so they believe in them.
So yeah, there actually is a bogeyman under the bed.
But they also believe in the poker, which I enjoy the setup for that so much, because it's like, okay, one of the kids tells her that there's a monster under the bed and she gets the poker and she goes down. And her bosses are having like a fancy rich people gathering for Hogswatch.
Yes.
And they're like, I say, there's a girl out here with a poker. And she's like, yep, what of it? And they're like, what are you doing? And she's like, well, Twyla says there's a monster in the cellar. And they're like, oh, I see, this is psychology, is it? You're gonna pretend to go beat up the monster, and then like the little girl won't be afraid anymore. Very modern, good show, that girl. And he's like, oh, I want to see a girl beat up a monster with a poker. Yeah. And then they hear the noises from the cellar, and it sounds frighteningly real. And, and like later, Susan drags a body out. Anyway, the point of this story is, one, if you believe in the poker, it kills monsters, and two, like she's met the Scissor Man before. She's beaten him up before. That's what she does when she meets him. She's like, you're not my monster. And also, remember how I beat you up that other time? Do you remember the poker? Yeah. Like, jog on. Yep. And he does, because Susan is terrifying.
Yep.
But yes, like the Castle of the Tooth Fairy is like, even with like, there's the kind of metaphysical wrongness of like being inside a child's drawing, and like the inside is kind of described as being like very Escher painting, like the staircases don't add up.
Well, there are no shadows, like, because when you're a kid and you're drawing a house, you don't add shadows.
Yeah.
You don't make things look real in 3D, and that's even more sort of stark when you're inside.
Yeah, and like the pile of teeth is described really creepily. Like that's a really good like.
Oh, it's the fact that if you think about it, like just a pile of teeth, like that's quite a horrifying image.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It's like one of those things when you actually think about. Like, going back to the belief thing again, is, it's quite flippant for somebody, there's a monster under your bed. And then the child's mind will take it and run with it. And that could genuinely scare them. Like, the adult knows it doesn't exist, but the kid could genuinely scare them.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, like, a tooth fairy collecting tiny teeth, that is quite terrifying. And the fact that they run it just like a delivery network, just like, oh, I'm just a runner. I just collect really the teeth funny. And I pass it off to Bob, who goes and takes it somewhere else. I don't know where to go when Susan's on this like journey to find out.
It's full of jobsworths, is the tooth fairy business.
Yes. I do really enjoy like the satirization of Christmas in the sense that Death is just going around like giving out shit for free, because that is kind of what he feels the meanings of Hogswatch. And
Death's idea of Hogswatch is childish, it's childlike, right? Yes, of course you get things for free. That's what Hogswatch is. Of course it should be a time of warmth and cheer, and people shouldn't suffer.
He thinks about what it should be and not what it is, which I think is an interesting definition, like difference between him and Susan. Yeah. But yeah, I was going to say that kind of brings us on to the sort of the other thing that I think this has in common with Christmas Carol is, it's talking about money and the relationship that plays to Christmas or Hogswatch. And, you know, like I made a joke in my notes. I was just like, Comrade Death and his socialist agenda. But there's like, there's a whole conversation he has with Albert about like how, it's easy to be naughty or nice. It's easy to be nice if you're rich. And Albert, who has met a lot of rich people, is like, and yet somehow none of them seem to manage it. But like, there's multiple moments where he's like, this is how it shouldn't go. Yeah. You know?
Well, there's that one scene with the king.
Good King Wenceslas.
Who comes to offer a great steaming big Hogswatch night dinner to a poor peasant who lives at the outskirts of his kingdom. And the king is just doing it because he wants to feel good. He isn't doing it because he actually gives a shit about this person. He's just doing it because isn't that a nice thing to do a charity on Hogswatch night?
And he's giving him a bunch of like fancy leftovers from his table that like the guy can't possibly, he's on his own, he can't possibly eat all that, and he doesn't actually want to. Like, he's not used to that.
No, he's just like, you know, I don't actually want to take charity. Like, I don't want to take something for nothing. I'm quite happy with my pot of beans. And the king gets mad. He gets really, like, offended that this guy...
I expect you're jolly grateful, aren't you?
Exactly, yeah. And it's...
It's quite, like you say, it's sort of the reflection of what Christmas as a child you feel like, you know, when it's, you get stuff for free, because obviously the kid's not buying the presents. And, like, you know, the joy and wonder around it. And then when you actually grow up and as an adult, you're like, oh, God, you know... buying lots of gifts is very expensive, you're having to budget for it, you're having to work out like lots of different things. And
but even, I mean, I think it works in other ways as well, because like there's children who know that it's not true, right? Because that's how what it was like for Albert and what it's like for Nobby. It's not a time of wonder, it's a time of disappointment, because there's nothing you don't get anything. You think, oh, I'm supposed to get things. This is supposed to be wonderful. And it's not fair. You know, it's proportional. You know, it's like poor people get poor people shit and rich people get rich people shit. And the more Death sees of that, the more absolutely done with it he is.
Yeah.
So the point of, I want to talk about the restaurant. The restaurant and the beggars.
Oh,
so the beggars are an Ankh-Morpork fixture. I adore them. But like, so it's Foul Old Ron and his gang, and they,
What is Duckman's deal, by the way?
He has a duck on his head, and he insists that he doesn't have a duck on his head. That's the whole thing.
But we get a hint in this that he used to be, like,
he used to. I don't know if it's supposed to be a reference to something, or if it's just something that Terry Pratchett thought would be extremely funny. Which, to be fair to him, it's pretty funny.
It is.
Like, he has no idea why he's called the Duck Man, and that's very pleasing to me. But yeah, so Death basically robs a fancy rich person restaurant and gives all the fancy food to Foul Old Ron and his gang. But he leaves in the restaurant what they were going to have for Hogswatch dinner, which was mud and old boots.
Yeah.
Basically. And then you get this whole skit of the restaurant with the chef, like, faking fancy food out of mud and old boots, and it's really, really funny. But
the funny thing is they run out of boots. The customers love it.
Yeah, so there's a scene later where he's trying to get the other chef to, like, give up his boots. It's like, I'll buy you more boots, damn it, take your shoes.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
But again, it's just like, it comes back to the fact that it's like you've got you're basically selling mud and old boots into this fancy restaurant.
Wait, I mean, that's the haute couture, not haute couture, haute cuisine joke, isn't it?
Well, things are what you believe them to be.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, that's a good point.
They believe that it is haute cuisine, and so that's what they experience.
Yeah.
It's, again, the whole belief thing.
I want to talk about Albert's reaction to it a little bit, because it's basically the cactus meme from The Good Place. He's like, so, where did you get all of that fancy food? And Death's like, well, it came out of the sack. Albert's like, it came out of the sack. And he's like, it came out of the sack. And it's like, was it always in the sack? And Death's like, I'm pretty sure it was I got it out of the sack. And it's like, that's not what I said. Did it come from the restaurant and then go into the sack? And Death's like, I'm like, maybe? And Albert's like, oh my God, you can't do this.
No, you can't do that.
It's just the whole exchange is so funny. I'm going to see if I can find it.
It is exquisite, yeah.
Like, it's definitely stuck in my mind.
The whole, like, Death being like, butter wouldn't melt.
Yeah. And they're just asking the same question over and over again and here we go. You didn't get that stuff out of the sack. Not cigars and peaches and brandy and grub with fancy foreign names. Yes, it came out of the sack. Albert gave him a suspicious look. But you put it in the sack in the first place, didn't you? He's like, no. You did, didn't you? Albert stated, no. You put all of those things in the sack. No. You got them from somewhere and put them in the sack. No. You did put them in the sack, didn't you? No. You put them in the sack. Yes. I knew you put them in the sack. Where did you get them? They were just lying around. It's like, whole roast pig does not, in my experience, just lie around. No one seemed to be using them, Albert. It's so good.
Oh,
I love him. I love Comrade Death, and he's he's so good.
it is great. It is a good time.
Anyway.
This just in, socialists love Death.
Like, I mean, the other thing that I found quite funny as it was talking about the assassins again, was kind of that's the other example of, like, rich people doing rich people shit in this novel.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like if the wizards are a send-up of Oxbridge, like, the assassins are very much a send-up of, like, the British upper classes.
I was going to say, like, Eton.
Yeah. It's kind of like, we're assassins with a capital A. We don't, you know, we
don't murder, we inhume.
Yeah, and it's just like,
you know,
off. You kill people.
We don't do war crimes, we civilize. You know, it's that delicate Tory language of, oh, you know, we've made it pretty, so it's not murder anymore.
Yeah.
Look, we said it with style, so it doesn't count. I particularly enjoyed Downey being like, he thought of them as being, you know, an equal opportunity service. You know, they didn't discriminate as long as you had money.
Yeah.
And, like, that is what they were. It's like, of course there were poor people who couldn't afford them, but he said something like, there was no helping some people. Yeah. And that is such a British Tory, like, oh, it's not our fault that poor people don't have money. Like, if it's the ISMA thing. It's maybe you should have thought about that before you became peasants. And it's so, ugh! You see it on the news all the fucking time, and it drives me wild, and it's really, really funny to watch Pratchett just be so quietly angry and hilarious about it.
Like, nobody asked to be poor. It's not like this is a life choice. It's
a nerve of people like him to be like, it's their fault. No, it's not. It's yours. That is how this whole system is set up. It is entirely your fault. And that is one of the things that Death is really, really mad about.
And I think that it... it plays back into, you believe what you think. So the assassins, you can't out-logic idiocy.
Yeah.
And that's what they believe.
And that's how the world is for them.
That's how the world works for them. They've never had to think about money in a day in their life. So they're like, well, why can't someone just, pull themselves up by the bootstraps in you and go get more money? Because I've never had to think about, that. So,
I particularly, one of the other things I enjoyed that felt very true to life was Downey saying that the reason he doesn't like tea time is because he has standards. He doesn't have morals, but he has standards.
Yes.
And that's it, isn't it? It's the be polite, be stylish, be elegant. Nobody make a fuss about this. It's very uncouth to talk about structural inequality, don't you know? But it's also the kind of unspoken rules.
Contrast later on when it says something about Medium Dave, and it's like any criminal, he had a highly developed moral sense.
Yeah. And like that's the reason that they can't. I mean, technically, in some ways, it's almost that they have standards too, right? Is that they don't enjoy killing people. Yeah. It's just a job that they do. They don't play with their food the way that tea time does. There's things you don't hit women, you don't hit kids. There's lines, there's rules, and tea time doesn't have any. Yeah. Which I was going to say actually reminds me, it's weird, because I think tea time in some ways is sort of a foil to Susan. I don't know what you call it. He's a dark mirror to Susan in some ways, in that he's like, I don't think there are any rules. And Susan and Death are both like intimately aware that there are rules, like you use doorknobs to open doors and not walk through the walls. Yeah. Yeah. And but Susan and Death both try. Like, Susan tries to be normal. She's like, have you any idea how exhausting it is to remember normal things like not walking through walls and, like, furniture being solid and not using the voice? And which, can I also just say, like, Death and Susan in this book are, like, big autism mood. Like, big neurodivergent mood. They're just like, have you any idea how exhausting it is to pretend to be a person the way all of you are people? It's very relatable.
Those things are only rules because people believe in them, because people do them. Because everybody uses a doorknob to open the door. I mean, it's not like everybody can walk through walls, but it's like the only reason why Susan cares is because other people can.
No, but you can Nakatomi space it, can't you? You can Nakatomi space it. You can be like, I am Bruce Willis and I will cut through the wall, the drywall,
sure.
Yeah.
But like the difference between how tea time is, tea time doesn't care that other people think there are rules.
Yeah.
And therefore he has no rules.
Yeah. Going on from the Susan theme. So one of our if you listen to the podcast regularly, we have always all the fun questions about books, and one of them we ask is, which Muppets would you have in this adaptation, and who is the only human in this Muppet adaptation of the book?
There's so many good options for like who's the only human, because it's talking so intensely about what it means to be human that like I mean I personally plump for Susan.
We didn't even talk about the amazing quote in this, the falling angel meets the rising ape.
Well, I think that goes back to what you were saying. We were just saying about like we believe there are rules, so there are rules, right? And that's kind of so. This is a major spoiler here, but like Death saying that if there's no Hogfather, the sun won't come up tomorrow. He says, and like the turnaround is that a mere ball of flaming gas would have illuminated the world. Because everything we tell ourselves about what everything is around us is a story that we all believe in. And you have to learn to believe in things like, you have to believe in things that aren't true. How else can they become? Like justice and mercy aren't real. They're about as real as the Hogfather is, right? But you have to believe in them.
And they become real if we all believe in them.
And like, the all of the sort of the things that kids are afraid of and believe in are training wheels for the believing in the big lies.
Yeah.
Which, is I love as a thesis statement. And this is nothing to do with who I think would be a What's It in a Muppet adaptation. But
and Susan's response is, people have got to believe in those things like justice and truth and mercy, or else what's the point? And that's basically my life philosophy. Is like, well, as somebody who is religious, but like, you know, can go either way on the existence of God. Like, it doesn't matter. You've still got to do the right thing anyway, or else what is the point of being alive?
That brings me on to one of my favourite protagonist beats of all time, which is Susan at the beginning of this. I forgot that this was Susan, but it's like, it's true of a lot of Discworld protagonists, I think. It's Susan saying, people always say things like, somebody ought to do something. And that's not very helpful on its own, because nobody ever follows that with, and that someone is me. And Susan's like, she was aware that the pool of someone's now consisted entirely of her, so she's got to do it. Mm-hmm. You know? And that's so, like, that's such a Discworld protagonist thing. Like, Rincewind, I love Rincewind. We're probably not going to read one of his books on here, because they're not, like, they're not classic Discworld, maybe, I don't know. But, like, the thing about Rincewind is, he's a coward. He runs away from everything, except when there's nobody else to hold the line, and somebody's got to swing a half brick in a sock at a monster from the dungeon dimensions. He's the only one there. He's the only one that can do it, so he's going to do it. And it's true of, like, I guess the moment in Small Gods where they're like, you mean you don't know what difference it makes if we all die trying to save brother? It does make a difference. It does mean something, and somebody's got to do it.
It's the what you are in the dark.
Like, it's you are here and this is now. And nobody else is going to do it if you don't, you know?
Yeah, this is real, sort of. What's that phrase? It's like...
here and now we are alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In this book, who do you think would make the best or worst roommate? I mean, I think Tea Time would make the worst roommate. Like, by far. He's nuts.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like Susan would get on my nerve. Any of the wizards would be extremely frustrating to be roommates with.
I think I could live with Ponder Stibbons.
I think I just want Death of Rats, because he just squeaks all the time and it's adorable.
Oh, yes,
it does. Tiny little scythe. And he has a tiny scythe and it's adorable.
This brings us kind of back to the Muppets thing, is that I don't know that we can necessarily cast a Muppets adaptation of this, because it is basically a Muppets film already, right? We've got the dynamic duo of the Raven and the Grim Squeaker as Gonzo and Rizzo. You know, like, one of them is literally here for the food, a la Muppets Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
You know, like, the setup is already so Muppets movie. I do quite like the idea that Susan is the only human in the Muppets adaptation.
And so I guess our key question is, what do we think our cat would rate this book? Keeping the integrity of the cat rating.
I think quite high.
I think she'd rate it very highly.
There's a lot of shenanigans. There's a lot of murder. There's a lot of violence and backstabbing.
Death actually has cats, so there are actually cats in this book.
It's a whole house full of cats, which I think is more cats than we have ever had.
It's very spoiled cats.
In one book in this podcast, which I think earns it a very high rating.
What else does she love? I mean, there's lots of delicious food.
That is true.
Lots of things get stolen. Lots of things get stabbed.
Yep.
I feel like all the sort of moving shadows and bogeymen and things she would also really enjoy killing.
Yes.
I think that would be pleasing to her. Also, how do we know that when she's looking around at things we can't see that they're not auditors?
It's true.
She might be the greatest auditor killer of our time, and we just would never know.
You know, we thank her for her service, yeah.
I'm leaning towards a 9 or a 10. Gotta say.
I think agree. I mean, to be honest, I love this book, and I think if you're listening to this episode and you haven't listened to or like read the book, I would really recommend, just even if again, you don't have to understand the plot, it's just a fun time. It is a fun time at Hogswatch.
I tell you what, I was thinking earlier when we were talking about it, what would I say you need to read in order for this to make the most sense? And I think actually, while you could read some Guards, or you could read some of like Moving Pictures or whatever with other, or Reaper Man, other death books, I think, or other books with the wizards in that kind of sense. I think actually all you really need for this to get this at its fullest is actually Soul Music, which is the first Susan book, where like she doesn't know at that point.
Well, I was going to say, I was going to say Small Gods as well, because we have actually done that, and it introduces the whole belief thing.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. But like Soul Music, I mean, it introduces Susan as Death's granddaughter. She's in like fancy boarding school at that point. And she is determined to not believe in things like death and the Hogfather and whatever. And that's also where she first meets the wizards, because she has to... So Death goes on holiday again, as he is occasionally wont to do. which means she gets sucked in to being death, and that's how she meets the wizards, because every time the wizards are like, we have a question we can't answer, let's summon death. And this time they get Susan.
Well, especially because they there's a whole bit about like wizards know when they're going to die, like they have enough time to put on their nice robes and like drink a lot and stuff. And so whenever death shows up, they're not like scared of him because they know it's not their time.
Yeah.
So they're just really chill about like hanging out with death.
They are just like, we will summon him from a really fancy cocktail party to tell us what's wrong with the nature of reality this time. And yeah, sometimes they get Susan instead. And like, that's why she and Ridcully are friends.
Yeah.
Because he was actually a pretty decent... I will say this in Ridcully's defense, the other wizards are always extremely gross around women, and Ridcully never is. And I appreciate that about him.
He's just very sensible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like exposure to Granny Weatherwax.
Quite possibly, yeah.
Okay, yeah. It's quite interesting, like you say, listening to all the links to all the other books.
Yeah, this is a very interconnected Discworld book. I think there are others that sit better on their own.
Yeah. Small Gods, I think, sits on its own quite well, but... and
I think things like... Monstrous Regiment to an extent, and like the starter books in a bunch of other sequences... The Truth, maybe. But, like, I think this one is very embedded in Discworld and in Ankh-Morpork, which I really like. And I love this.
I reckon Thud, actually, could be a standalone.
Really?
Maybe.
I don't know, because...
I don't know. Of all of, like... I don't know. Maybe it's just because I've read it so many times.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think, for me, Thud is, like, the apex of Sam Vimes' books, right? But I think the part of the reason for that is that it is the culmination of everything we've seen him go through before.
That's fair.
And, like, it is a book that's very much about Ankh-Morpork's modernization.
Yeah.
And that's something that's been growing really slowly across the whole thing.
That's fair enough.
Like, do I think it works on its own? Probably. But do I think you would lose a lot of the depth of it if you didn't already know Sam Vimes and, like, how the city works? I think probably.
We could do a witch's book.
We could do a witch's book.
Yeah.
We could do, I mean, if we do Weird Sisters, that's like Macbeth. So we could do it with Macbeth, and then that's 2 for the price of 1.
Season 3, we're already planning it.
So, which, speaking of which, what else have you guys been reading?
Well, I have... I've reread the prequel to Wheel of Time, New Spring, in preparation for the TV show that will have come out by the time this episode is up online, which I am very, 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 very excited for, and I really hope it does the books justice. And that is all I'm going to say before I end up on a rant. Oh, not a rant, but just like a I love these books rant.
I've been a little gremlin. I haven't been reading anything. I've just been like sleeping most of the time that I'm not working or doing other things.
That's fair. That's fair life choice.
Yep. I mean, it's when we're recording this, the clocks have just gone back. So like it throws all
you
kinds
off.
of manners of my body is not liking it.
I think all my words are going on nano is the thing. My ability to like comprehend and like what's it words has like. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sort of rereading This Is How You Lose the Time War, which I find it's a very good before bed book because it's so divided up into there's a letter, there's a lead up to a letter, there's a letter, there's a lead. So you can read it in small chunks, which I quite like.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I spent the whole of yesterday reading Nirvana in Fire fan fiction when I haven't even finished the goddamn show yet. So that's where I'm at in my life.
I mean, I just literally at the time I was recording, I'm just thinking like I've just finished watching the new Bond film, which is brilliant.
Oh, yes.
I kind of just want to just go and read fanfic now. Just like Bond has just make the ending. Just like I cried so Hans Zimmer music. I cried, just wept openly in the cinema, just like weeping because the Hans Zimmer violins. Okay, it's fine.
I love that it's the soundtrack that's doing it and not the like.
I mean, it is very moving at the end of the film. I'm not going to spoil anything, but
it does seem to follow the odd even rule. It's like Star Trek. You get a good Bond movie, then a Bond movie, then a good Bond movie, right?
But yeah, so next time we're going to chat about Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. So thank you all.
Oh, back on our Austen.
Yeah, back on the Austen. Woo! Thank you all so much for listening. Remember to follow us on your podcast platform so you never miss an episode, and give us a like or review if you can on your platform if you enjoyed listening to this episode. You can also follow us on all our socials or email us. It's all linked in the description box below. Remember, we now have a Goodreads group to read along with all the books for this series, so join in with the bookish chat. So say hello, send us a message, and recommend us some books to read. Big virtual hugs, and we will see you next time. Bye!
Bye!